Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the raspberry supermoon in Capricorn, which is occurring on July 3rd, 2023 at 6:39 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you live overseas, Europe, and elsewhere, this is going to be in the afternoon or evening. I don't think anywhere in the world it will be on the 4th, but I could be wrong about that. And, I'm sure I'm going to be the only one to call this the raspberry moon because last month in June we had the strawberry moon, and I am assuming, based on the online source that I obtained this information from, which was almanac.com, that this is because of the fruiting of raspberries in July and strawberries, of course, in June. The other name that I see a lot is the buck moon, and that's because the antlers of the deer, the male deer, are at their height or their fullest. I live in a suburb where I do see deer, but they seem to be at certain times of the year. So recently I was recording an astrology video, and in the corner of my eyes, I saw some deer like kind of darting past in the side yard, and it's not uncommon to see deer, but it seems like it's concentrated at certain times of year, so this must be one of them. But for the males, when they have those full antlers, you should always realize they might be kind of feisty. So it's not that I'm necessarily afraid of deer, but the male deer, it's really wild when they have those big antlers. So this is a supermoon, and there are several supermoons this year. And I actually was curious, so I looked it up. And in August, we're going to have two supermoons. And they're going to be, one of them is going to be a blue moon, on, I guess it's going to be the Pisces full moon on August 30th. So that should be really something. The supermoon is technically supposed to be just one full moon and one new moon each year. So they just have kind of extended it to any full moon that is more than the usual size. And I think they said something like 6 or 8% bigger than the typical full moon. And it's closer to Earth, so ostensibly we would say it exerts more influence on the Earth because it is closer or because it's bigger. So I've never really remember anybody explaining why a supermoon is more significant, but that's in terms of astrology, I would assume that's why it is. Now, at every full moon, the sun is in opposition to that moon. So the sun, we are in Cancer season, so the sun is in Cancer. This is at 11 degrees, and 11 is a master number. So if you want to take it to that level, you can see this as significant of something of a spiritual nature. And I remember one numerologist talking about the number 11 as this enhanced version of 1, where, and she mentioned 2 pillars that you walk through. So even though full moons can tend to be more of the culmination of something, because it's an 11, you might see it as an initiation as well. It definitely can be a fertile time, a full moon period, the most. So with fertility can come birth and some sort of new thing coming into being. So in terms of creation, so I guess it works both ways. Now, this particular full moon, if we always think about full moons as emotional times and just look at the sign that the full moon is in this time around, Capricorn is not an emotional sign by any stretch of the imagination. It's an earth sign, it's a cardinal sign, and it's ruled by Saturn. Saturn is about discipline, organization, ambition. Those are not emotional topics, those are more pragmatic. But because the sun is in a water sign like Cancer and opposing that moon, there still can be emotion generated. And when I look at some of the personal planets, or even just the planets in general, we have the sun in Cancer, the moon in Capricorn, Mercury in Cancer, and then Venus and Mars in Leo. And they are, Venus and Mars, the divine lovers, are close enough in degrees that they form a conjunction. A conjunction enhances the energy that is coming together between two planets. And in fire, we have emotion as well. It's a different type of emotion than Cancer, per se, but it still is emotional. I would call it more passionate than emotional. Cancer is the ruler of the fourth house of home and family. And so childhood, the past, is really strong with Cancer, sentimentality. And so this can be a time where there is this, I don't know if I call it a conflict or a back and forth between the past and what we want to achieve now. And on the larger scale, this is occurring the day before the 4th of July, which in America, that's the birthday of America, is the 4th of July. So this could have implications for the United States in terms of something occurring. Full moons can bring out hidden information, secrets. And because it's in Capricorn, Capricorn rules governments, these kinds of structures that are part of our society. And we also have Pluto having gone back into Capricorn. So that is significant as well, and that could figure into any kind of revelations that occur around this time. But with Cancer, there is more of a personal aspect to this, because Mercury is also in Cancer. That affects the mind, and memory is part of the mind. And the person, we all may be reflecting back on how we were raised, how we grew up, and comparing it to how we feel about things now. And it's so funny because, I really like to read people's comments on social media, but like YouTube, for instance, there'll be some video and people will talk about the good old days. And they could be the 90s, for some people, the good old days is the 90s or the 70s or what have you, or way earlier than that. And people always idealize the past, you will find. Well, usually. And so this is problematic because it can give this illusion that your best days are behind you. And you never want to think that, first off, but it's not true as well. Because especially if you're comparing it to childhood, you didn't have the same autonomy that you do now, where you can kind of make your own decisions. So if you find yourself longing for this, mythical past that probably never existed, snap yourself back into reality, but also realize that the best is yet to come. Because some of these things that are happening that seem very messy in the world are going to lead us to a totally different paradigm. And I do believe this. Obviously, I've heard other people talk about this, so it's not like I'm making this up. But I don't just believe everything I hear. I feel this simply because I know what I have experienced in the past and how different things are these days. And that we see this kind of slipping away of order. And that's what Pluto and Capricorn is the destruction of that kind of authority that these different institutions have had over humanity. And we see it whether we're talking about law enforcement, whether we're talking about the government, the financial system, the educational system. Everything seems to be kind of crumbling. And for people that look to these areas to kind of feel safe, it's harder and harder to do so. But then when you bring in the Cancer energy, it's important to note too that Cancer really is desiring safety. And, Cancer is that sign of the nurturer, the mother. The mother wants to make others safe, but I think there's also that desire that Cancer has to make themselves safe, not just other people. And it's not necessarily happening. And Cancer is a cardinal sign, as is Capricorn. And sometimes there's this illusion that if we do something, we're going to control it. And I do agree that doing something is many times better than not doing something, because at least you try. But sometimes people take that to mean that they can control the situation. And these times, with Pluto in a cardinal sign, we will discover that this is not true, that sometimes we simply have to be able to endure what is occurring, as well as, kind of like be flexible enough to shift with the shifting times, the shifting winds. And Cancer and Capricorn are traditional signs, so they really put a lot of stock in what has come before. And we are in new territory, unexplored territory. And we have to be willing. This is more like Aries energy, which is kind of pioneering energy. And we have to be willing to adapt. And some people have a difficult time with that because of that excessive need for security. So it's a very interesting dilemma, suffice it to say. Honestly, when I look at these angles that are formed during this full moon, I really see a lot of positive ones. For instance, we have the sun in conjunction with Mercury, so there is an emphasis on the rational mind. The sextile from the sun to Jupiter, a trine from the moon to Jupiter and a sextile from Mercury to Jupiter. Sextiles and trines are friendly angles that are, cooperative and help manifesting what the two planets combined generate. And with Jupiter, it's all about having a broader understanding or a more positive attitude. So this can enhance your disposition, your mood, your ability to accomplish goals. You may go after things of a more positive nature, versus being self-destructive. And sometimes people are well-meaning in what they're trying to do, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't yield positive results. And in this case, it could very well do that. Another thing that is happening is we have trines from the Sun and Mercury to Saturn and a sextile from the Moon to Saturn. So those are kind of reversed positive angles. And Saturn represents, as I said earlier, discipline, organization, ambition. And with these cooperative angles, it's easier to make things happen. For instance, with Mercury, it's a great energy for studying something where you need a lot of concentration. And you don't, when I think of the word concentration, as somebody who has diagnosed myself with ADD, just even saying the word concentration kind of made me go, ugh, because it makes me think of trying to do that. Whereas when you have a trine, and this could be in your birth chart, if you have a trine between Mercury and Saturn, it's like a joy. It's something that you do easily. You don't have to really make an effort to do it. It just happens naturally. And that's always the best because you're not forcing yourself, in other words. So yeah, and with the Sun trining Saturn, goals become easier to envision and accomplish. And the Moon, it provides more discipline emotionally, so that the person is not all over the place. So I think that there's a lot going on that is of a positive nature. Again, the Sun and Moon oppose one another, but also the Moon and Mercury. So how this can manifest is that it's as I go on with interpreting astrological influences, I really have been taking in this idea of like, what does the moon represent that Mercury doesn't? Because if you think about it, when you have a memory, is that emotional or is it mental? Well, we can say it's both. It's an emotionally charged idea, a memory. Now, of course, there might be memories that aren't really emotional. You just think of something from your past, but a lot of times they do hold emotion. And so I've begun to wonder, where does the mind end and the emotions begin? Sometimes sometimes it seems like our mind is triggering emotions. And certainly with meditation, a person can gain more mastery over their emotions. So I think that they are connected, and here they are opposing one another. So we have to be very disciplined and not allow ourselves to get carried away, especially when it comes to the past and childhood and being fear-based, because you will see, like for instance, in the media, this tendency to try to trigger people into being afraid of something that is impending, this doom, or something that is currently happening that you may not personally be aware of. It doesn't seem to be affecting you at all. But here it is, pay attention to this. And and Mercury is featured here because the sun is in conjunction with it and the moon is opposing it. So Mercury being like, could be the media, sources of information, and we have the power to decide how we allow it inside of us and to affect us. So, okay, well, I think I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to kind of, bring this up because it's going to be here before we know it. I can't believe we're almost in July. And I hope everyone has a great experience during this time. And thank you for listening. Take care.